You have heard the word 1,000 times. Harem. You have seen it in paintings, in films, in television dramas. Women draped in silk, reclining in perfumed baths, waiting for a sultan to notice them. A fantasy. A palace of pleasure. A world of seduction and intrigue. But here's what they never showed you. The harem was not a fantasy. It was a government. It had its own laws, its own courts, its own economy, its own army of servants, spies, and power brokers. And for nearly a century and a half, it was the most powerful political institution in the Ottoman Empire. Today, we go inside. The real harem. The one history forgot to tell you about. Let's start with the word itself. Harem. It comes from the Arabic word haram, meaning forbidden, or sacred, or protected. In the Ottoman world, the harem was simply the private section of any household, the area where women and children lived off limits to unrelated men. Every Ottoman home had a harem. A poor farmer's home had a harem. A merchant's home had a harem. The imperial harem, the Sultan's harem at Topkapi Palace, was simply the largest and most powerful version of this institution. It was not a brothel. It was not a prison. It was the Sultan's household, his family, his court, his political inner circle, and it occupied more than 400 rooms inside Topkapi Palace, larger than most European royal palaces of its time. Now, let's talk about the numbers. Because the reality is more extraordinary than any myth, Sultan Murad III, who ruled from 1574 to 1595, had 40 women with their own private quarters inside the harem, each with their own rooms, servants, and allowances. When Murad III died in 1595, historians recorded that over 100 cradles were being rocked simultaneously inside the harem walls. 100 infants, all his children. But here's the other side of that same coin. Sultan Selim I, one woman his entire life. Sultan Murad IV, one woman. Sultan Mehmed III, one woman. The harem did not force the sultans into excess. Some chose devotion. Some chose indulgence. The institution accommodated both. At the height of the empire's power, between 600 and 800 eunuchs served inside Topkapi Palace alone. 600 to 800 men whose entire lives were dedicated to guarding and managing this single institution. The harem had its own kitchens, its own bathhouses, its own mosques, its own schools, its own hospital. It was, in every sense of the word, a city within a city. And the women who lived there? The majority of them never met the Sultan. Not once. They lived, trained, and served, not as his companions, but as the empire's most elite workforce. So who were these women? And how did they come to live behind the gilded walls of Topkapi? From the 15th century onward, the Ottoman sultans made a deliberate political decision. They would no longer marry foreign princesses. Those alliances brought dangerous outside loyalties into the palace. Instead, the imperial dynasty would reproduce through concubines, women of slave origin with no powerful family behind them. Loyal to no one but the Sultan himself. These women arrived through several channels. Some were seized during Ottoman military campaigns. Prisoners of war from the Balkans, the Caucasus, and Eastern Europe. Others were purchased at slave markets in Istanbul, Alexandria, and Crimea. Some were sent as gifts, tribute from ambitious provincial governors hoping to gain the Sultan's favor. The most prized women came from the Caucasus region, Circassian and Georgian girls, renowned across the empire for their beauty. Historical records show that sultans sometimes exchanged significant quantities of horses and goods to acquire particularly prized Caucasian women. Once inside the palace, these girls, some as young as 12 or 13, entered a training system that would last years. They studied Ottoman Turkish, Arabic, the Quran, music, embroidery, dance, court etiquette. They were being prepared, not just to please a sultan, but to govern, to manage households, to raise future sultans, to navigate the most complex political environment in the known world. Now here is where the myth completely collapses. Because the harem was not run by the sultan. It was run by a woman. At the very top of the harem hierarchy stood the Valide Sultan, the mother of the reigning sultan. She controlled every appointment, every promotion, every punishment, every marriage arrangement inside those 400 rooms. Her political power extended far beyond domestic matters. Foreign ambassadors knew that to influence the sultan, you first had to win the favor of his mother. She received envoys. She corresponded with foreign rulers. She managed vast personal fortunes and funded public works across the empire. Below the Valide Sultan came the Haseki, the sultan's favorite, the woman who had captured his heart, and more importantly, borne him a son. Then came the Kadınlar, the official consorts who had borne children. They ranked higher than the sultan's own sisters and aunts. Their stipends reflected their power. One favorite consort received 1,000 silver coins per day, while a princess of the blood received only 250 or 300. Below them, the Ikbaler, women who had been called to the sultan's chambers. Then the Gedikli, personal attendants. And at the base, the Acemi, the new recruits, still in training. Every woman knew her rank. Every woman knew her path. And every woman knew the rules. The harem had a constitution. Unwritten, but absolute. The chief black eunuch, the Kizlar Agha, was the enforcer of this constitution. He was second only to the Grand Vizier in palace hierarchy. He knew every secret, every alliance, every debt. In the history of the harem, no story is more astonishing than that of Hurrem Sultan. She arrived in Istanbul sometime in the early 1520s. A girl from Ruthenia in what is now modern-day Ukraine, captured by Crimean Tatar slavers and sold at the Istanbul slave markets. Her real name is lost to history. The Sultan renamed her Hurrem, meaning the joyful one, because she laughed. In a world of calculated silence and careful performance, she laughed. She broke the first rule. The oldest rule of the Ottoman Harem: one concubine, one son. Each woman was to give the Sultan a single male heir, and then follow that heir to his provincial posting. Never returned to Istanbul, Hurrem bore Suleiman 6 children, including 5 sons. And she never left. She remained in Istanbul. She remained by his side. She broke the second rule. She was a slave. In the year 1533 or 1534, Suleiman the Magnificent, the most powerful ruler on earth, did something that had not been done for over 200 years. He freed her. And he married her. The scandal echoed across Europe. European ambassadors wrote home in disbelief. The Ottoman court was stunned. The old harem elite was furious, but Hurrem was not finished. She was now not just a wife, she was a political force. She built mosques, schools, a hospital for women in Jerusalem, a soup kitchen that fed hundreds of the poor every day. Her salary, 2,000 silver coins per day, made her the highest paid woman in Ottoman history. And to protect her son's path to the throne, she is believed to have orchestrated the fall of Ibrahim Pasha, the Grand Vizier and Suleiman's closest friend, who was strangled on the Sultan's orders in 1536. Hurrem Sultan died in 1558. The Sultan himself, who was supposed to remain in the palace during royal funerals, came out to mourn her publicly, an act no sultan had performed in living memory. Bu dönem haremin zirve gücü, güven ve hayret karışımı ton, what Hurrem Sultan started, became one of the most remarkable eras in Ottoman history. Historians call it the Sultanate of Women. It lasted from roughly 1534 to 1715. For nearly 200 years, the most powerful political figures in the Ottoman Empire were women of the harem. Nurbanu Sultan, born in Venice, captured as a child, risen to Valide Sultan, actively directed Ottoman foreign policy. She corresponded directly with Catherine de' Medici, Queen of France, two of the most powerful women in the world, writing to each other across enemy lines. Safiye Sultan, an Albanian concubine, influenced the policies of 3 consecutive sultans. She maintained private correspondence with Queen Elizabeth I of England, sending her gifts and negotiating trade agreements. And then came Kosem Sultan, born on the Greek island of Tinos around 1589. She became the Haseki of Sultan Ahmed I. She outlasted him, and she ruled as regent, literally governing the empire, 3 separate times, for 3 different sultans. For over 30 years, she was the most powerful person in the Ottoman Empire. Kosem Sultan fed the poor from her personal fortune. She freed slaves. She negotiated the release of prisoners. She is remembered as one of the most effective and humane rulers in Ottoman history. She was assassinated in 1651 by her own daughter-in-law inside the harem. Even at the end, the harem was the arena where the empire's greatest battles were fought. But we cannot tell the story of the harem without telling its darkest chapters. Sultan Ibrahim I, known to history as Ibrahim the Mad, ruled from 1640 to 1648. According to historical records, when he grew tired of his concubines, he ordered all 280 of them placed in sacks and drowned in the Bosphorus. When Sultan Murad III died in 1595, his son and successor Mehmed III had his 19 half-brothers strangled on the same night, and 7 pregnant concubines of the former sultan were tied in sacks and thrown into the sea. To protect the throne, to eliminate rivals, the cafes, the golden cage. When the practice of sending princes to govern provinces ended, Ottoman princes were instead locked inside luxurious apartments within the harem for their entire lives. Beautiful rooms, no windows to the world, no contact with the outside. Educated, federal, pampered, and completely powerless. Some princes spent decades in the cafes before suddenly being called to rule an empire they had never seen. It destroyed some of them. It explains much of the madness that plagued the later Ottoman sultans. So where did the myth come from? Where did the fantasy of the perfumed pleasure palace originate? From European men who were never allowed inside. Non-Muslim men were strictly forbidden from entering the imperial harem. Every European ambassador, every Western traveler, every Orientalist painter who wrote about the harem had never seen it. They imagined it, and they imagined it according to their own fantasies. Artists like Jean-Léon Gérôme painted elaborate scenes of naked women in marble baths. These paintings became so famous, so widely reproduced, that they became the world's mental image of the harem. But the women who actually lived there told a different story. Memoirs written by former harem women describe not a palace of pleasure, but a rigorous, disciplined institution, where most women spent their days in study, prayer, and service, where politics was as brutal as any battlefield. The harem produced diplomats, poets, architects of public works, regents who governed a continent. The fantasy erased all of that and replaced it with silk and smoke. The imperial harem formally ended in 1909, when the Ottoman Empire began its final, irreversible collapse. The last harem women left Topkapi Palace in 1909. Some were resettled. Some were married off to officials. Some had nowhere to go. The only world they had ever known simply ceased to exist. The sale of women as slaves in the Ottoman Empire was not officially abolished until 1908. As late as 1903, imperial records show the Ottoman family still officially owned 194 eunuchs, an institution that had shaped world history for nearly 5 centuries. Ended. Not with drama, not with revolution, but with silence. The harem was not what you were told. It was a world of immense power and immense suffering, of women who changed the course of empires, from behind walls that most of the world never saw. This was Ottoman Secrets. And the palace still has more to reveal. Subscribe and stay close, because every week we unlock a new secret.